charge you?
I'm complying. My deed is inside.
Oh my God.
What's going on over there?
Keep him up.
Before I tell you how this ends, let me start with the moment everything felt wrong. The kind of wrong that makes the air feel heavy. The kind that makes your chest tighten even before a single word is spoken. It was a bright weekday morning in Riverton, a growing American city filled with cranes, half-built towers, and busy streets. The sun was already high, shining down on a large construction site at the edge of downtown. Yellow machines hummed. Workers in hard hats moved back and forth. The sound of metal engines and voices filled the air. At the center of it all stood Marcus Reed. Marcus was a black man in his late 30s. Tall, calm, broad shoulders. He wore steel-toe boots, a clean white hard hat, and a safety vest with reflective stripes. Under the vest was a plain gray shirt. Nothing fancy. Nothing loud. Marcus stood near a set of blueprints laid out on the hood of a black pickup truck. He studied them carefully, one finger tracing lines and notes. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't angry. He looked like a man who knew exactly where he was supposed to be, because he did. Marcus Reed was the lead structural engineer on the project. He had designed the core support system for the building rising behind him. The job had taken years of school, long nights, and hard-earned trust. He had also served 8 years in the U.S. Army before becoming an engineer. But today, that part of his life stayed quiet, tucked away like it often was. To anyone watching closely, Marcus looked like the person in charge. But someone wasn't watching closely at all. A police cruiser rolled slowly past the site, then stopped. The engine idled. Inside the car sat Officer Kyle Brennan, early 30s, white, clean uniform, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He had been called to the area for a suspicious person report. The caller said there was a man who didn't look like he belonged, walking around the site, touching equipment, and giving instructions. Officer Brennan stepped out of his car. He didn't speak right away. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look for a supervisor or foreman. He walked straight toward Marcus. "Hey!" Brennan called out sharply. "You. Stop right there." Marcus looked up from the blueprints. His face stayed calm. "Morning, officer. What can I help you with?" Brennan's jaw tightened. "What are you doing here?" the officer asked. Marcus answered plainly. "I'm reviewing load plans for the west support beams." Brennan frowned like he didn't understand the words. Or didn't want to. "I asked what you're doing here," he said again, louder this time. Marcus stayed respectful. "I'm the structural engineer for this project." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Brennan laughed under his breath. "Yeah, okay. Where's your supervisor?" Marcus pointed toward the site trailer. "Inside. But I don't." "Don't move," Brennan snapped. Several workers nearby slowed down. One man, on a ladder, paused. A woman carrying tools stopped walking. People started watching. Marcus slowly raised his hands, not high, just enough to show he wasn't a threat. "Officer," he said evenly, "I'm cooperating." Brennan stepped closer. Too close. "ID," the officer demanded. Marcus reached slowly into his vest pocket and handed over his badge card. Company ID, name, title clearly printed. Brennan barely glanced at it. "This doesn't mean anything," he said. "Anyone can print this." Marcus took a breath. He had learned that skill a long time ago. "Sir," he said calmly, "if you like, I can call the project director." Brennan's voice dropped, sharp and cold. "No. What you're going to do is stay right here until I figure out why you're really on this site." That was the moment. The moment Marcus realized this wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about safety. And it wasn't about procedure. It was about assumption. And Officer Brennan had made the wrong one. Officer Brennan didn't step back. Instead, he stepped closer. Close enough that Marcus could smell the faint coffee on his breath. Close enough that the noise of the construction site seemed to fade, replaced by the sharp tension hanging between them. "I said don't move," Brennan repeated, his voice low and firm, like a warning. Marcus stayed exactly where he was. His hands were still visible. His face calm, but his eyes alert. Years in the Army had taught him how to read moments like this. He knew when a situation was shifting from uncomfortable to dangerous. "I'm not moving," Marcus said evenly. "I'm standing right here." Brennan reached for his radio, but didn't use it. Instead, he looked Marcus up and down again, slower this time. His eyes paused on Marcus's boots, then his vest, then his hands. "You got any weapons on you?" Brennan asked. "No, sir." "You sure about that?" "Yes." Brennan took half a step back, then suddenly placed his hand on his gun. He didn't pull it out yet, but the message was clear. Several workers nearby exchanged looks. A young worker named Luis, barely 20, whispered to the man next to him, "Is this really happening?" The man shook his head. "That's the engineer. He's here every day." Brennan ignored the murmurs. "Why didn't anyone vouch for you?" he demanded. Marcus answered calmly. "They're working, and I don't need someone to vouch for me to do my job." That answer irritated Brennan. "You're getting smart with me now," he snapped. "No," Marcus said. "I'm being clear." That was when Brennan's hand tightened on his weapon. "Turn around," he ordered. Slowly, Marcus felt the eyes on him. Dozens of them now. Cameras came out. A woman near the fence lifted her phone, pressing record. Someone else followed. Marcus turned slowly, just as instructed. Brennan moved behind him. "Hands on your head." Marcus complied. "You're detaining me?" Marcus asked calmly. "Yes," Brennan said, "until I verify who you really are." Marcus nodded once. "Okay." That calmness made Brennan angrier. He reached for the handcuffs. "Officer," Marcus said, still calm, "this is unnecessary." Brennan paused. "You don't get to tell me what's necessary." At that moment, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Hey, what's going on here?" A white man in a clean button-down shirt and hard hat walked out of the site trailer. His name was Ethan Wallace, the project manager. He stopped when he saw Marcus with his hands on his head. "Why is my engineer being detained?" Ethan asked. Brennan turned sharply. "Stay back, sir." "That's Marcus Reed," Ethan said. "He designed the site. He's in charge of—" "Sir, I said stay back," Brennan repeated, raising his voice. Ethan raised his hands slightly. "I'm not interfering. I'm explaining." Brennan didn't want an explanation. He wanted control. "I've got a suspicious person report," Brennan said. "And until I clear him, nobody leaves." Ethan stared at him. "Suspicious? He's been here for months." Brennan's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for your opinion." That was when Marcus spoke again. "Officer," he said quietly, "you can run my name. You can call my company. You can even call city planning. But what you're doing right now—" Brennan cut him off by pulling his gun halfway out of the holster. "Enough," he snapped. "Another word, and you're going to ground." The entire site went silent. The machine slowed. The talking stopped. Even the wind felt like it held its breath. Phones were fully raised now. Marcus froze, not in fear, but in awareness. He had been here before. Not in this uniform. Not in this place. But he knew exactly how fast moments like this could turn deadly. "Officer," he said slowly, "I am not a threat." Brennan didn't answer. Instead, he finally drew his weapon, just enough for the black metal to catch the sunlight. And in that moment, everyone watching understood something terrible. This was no longer about a misunderstanding. It was about power, and it was about to backfire. The gun stayed pointed downward, but everyone could see it. The black metal caught the sunlight as Officer Brennan held it halfway out, his finger tight near the trigger. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The message was clear. Do what I say, or else. Marcus stood perfectly still. His hands were still on his head. His breathing stayed slow and steady, even though his heart was pounding harder than he wanted anyone to know. This was the part people never understood. It wasn't the yelling. It wasn't even the gun. It was the waiting for one bad choice. One wrong move. 1 second where fear could turn into tragedy. Around them, the construction site felt frozen in time. Machines had stopped. Workers stood in silence. Phones were raised, recording everything. Some people whispered. Others just stared. Ethan Wallace took a careful step forward again. "Officer," he said calmly, "you're making a mistake." Brennan shot him a look. "Sir, I told you to stay back." Ethan stopped, hands open. "Okay, but I need you to understand something. Marcus Reed isn't some random guy. He's cleared by the city. He's cleared by the company. He's—" "Enough!" Brennan snapped. "I'm handling this." Marcus closed his eyes for a half-second. Not out of fear, out of memory. 8 years earlier, he had stood in a dusty street on the other side of the world. He remembered the sound of boots on gravel, the weight of a weapon in his own hands. The way calm was the only thing that kept people alive. He remembered being trained to slow his breathing, to listen, to survive moments that fell out of control. That training was the only reason his voice stayed steady now. "Officer Brennan," Marcus said gently. Brennan stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "It's on your uniform," Marcus replied. "I'm not trying to challenge you." Brennan's jaw tightened. "Then stop talking." Marcus nodded slightly. "Okay, but I need to say this once." Brennan hesitated. Just for a second. Marcus continued, slow and clear. "I'm a licensed engineer. I'm also a U.S. Army veteran. I've been trained to follow commands. I am following yours. Drawing your weapon right now is not necessary." That did something. Brennan didn't lower the gun, but his eyes changed. The confidence flickered. "Veteran?" he repeated. "Yes," Marcus said. 8 years. Brennan scoffed. "That doesn't mean anything here." Marcus didn't argue. "I understand." The radio on Brennan's shoulder crackled. "Unit 12, status update?" Brennan hesitated before answering. "I've got a situation. Possible impersonation." The dispatcher paused. "Impersonation of what?" Brennan glanced at Marcus again. "Engineer." There was a longer pause this time. "Copy," the dispatcher said slowly. "Supervisor en route." That word changed the air. Supervisor. Ethan exhaled quietly. Some workers nodded to each other. A woman near the fence whispered, "Good." Brennan didn't like that reaction. He shifted his stance and raised his voice again. "Until backup arrives, nobody moves," he said. Marcus spoke again, softer now. "Officer, may I lower my hands? They're cramping." Brennan stared at him, then nodded sharply, slowly. Marcus lowered his hands 1 inch at a time, then rested them calmly at his sides. The phones kept recording. A man across the street called out, "You got him at gunpoint for doing his job." Brennan turned his head. "Mind your business." The man didn't back down. "It is my business. I live here." Brennan looked around and realized something was slipping. Control. Marcus felt it too. He took a breath and made a decision. "Officer," he said, "I'm going to call someone now." Brennan snapped back. "You don't get to?" "It's my right," Marcus said calmly, "and I'm doing it slowly." He reached into his pocket, careful, deliberate, pulled out his phone. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call his boss. He called someone who had been waiting for this kind of moment his whole life. The line rang once. "Yeah," a deep voice answered. Marcus spoke quietly. "Sir, I need you at the site. Now." There was no question on the other end. "I'm on my way," the voice said. Marcus ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. Brennan watched him, uneasy now. "What was that?" he demanded. Marcus met his eyes for the first time fully. "That," he said calmly, "was someone who outranks both of us." The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time since stepping out of his cruiser, Officer Brennan wasn't sure he was in charge anymore. The sound came before anyone saw him. A second police cruiser pulled up fast, tires crunching against gravel at the edge of construction site. Its lights flashed once, then shut off. The engine stayed running. Officer Brennan turned his head sharply. A tall man stepped out of the car, gray at his temples, calm in his movements. His uniform was clean, pressed, and marked with rank. This wasn't just backup. This was Captain Robert Hayes. People straightened without realizing it. Even the air felt different. Captain Hayes scanned the scene in seconds. The drawn weapon, Marcus standing still, the workers filming the project manager nearby with his hands raised. Then his eyes locked on Brennan. "Why is your weapon out?" Hayes asked, his voice steady but firm. Brennan swallowed. "Sir, I have a suspicious individual who may be impersonating." "Put the gun away," Hayes said, cut him off. Brennan hesitated. Just for a moment. Hayes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Now." Brennan slowly slid the gun back into his holster. Marcus let out a quiet breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Hayes turned to Marcus. "Sir, are you injured?" "No, Captain," Marcus replied calmly. "But I was detained without cause." Hayes nodded. "Understood." He turned back to Brennan. "Walk me through this." Slowly. Brennan cleared his throat. "We received a call about a suspicious male on site. He couldn't provide valid identification." Ethan stepped forward. "That's not true," he said. "He gave you his company ID. I told you who he was." Hayes raised a hand to pause him, then looked back at Brennan. "You ran his name?" Brennan shook his head. "Not yet, sir." Hayes' jaw tightened slightly. "You drew your weapon before verifying identity?" Brennan didn't answer. Marcus spoke calmly. "Captain, I also informed him I'm a U.S. Army veteran and the lead engineer on this site." Hayes looked sharply at Brennan now. "Is that correct?" Brennan nodded. His face flushed. "Yes, sir." "And you still escalated?" The captain didn't yell. That made it worse. Brennan's voice dropped. "I felt threatened." The crowd reacted immediately. "Threatened by what?" Someone called out. "A man holding blueprints?" Another voice said. Hayes turned slowly toward the crowd. "Everyone, thank you for remaining calm. I understand emotions are high." He then faced Marcus again. "Sir, you said someone else was on the way?" Marcus nodded. "Yes." As if on cue, a black SUV pulled up beside the captain's cruiser. The door opened. A man stepped out wearing a clean suit, no uniform, broad shoulders, calm eyes, confident posture. Captain Hayes' face changed instantly. He stood straighter. "Colonel Reed," Hayes said, surprised. "I didn't know you were in the city." Marcus turned slightly. "This is my father." The site went dead silent. Colonel James Reed, retired Army officer, and now a senior federal infrastructure advisor, walked toward them. He didn't look at Brennan at first. He looked at his son. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. Colonel Reed nodded once, then turned to Captain Hayes. "I was told my son was detained at gunpoint while doing his job." Hayes took a breath. "That appears to be the case." Colonel Reed finally looked at Brennan. The look wasn't angry. It was disappointed. "Son," he said quietly, "you pulled a weapon on an unarmed veteran in front of witnesses without verifying a single fact." Brennan's shoulders slumped. Hayes spoke firmly now. "Officer Brennan, you're relieved of duty effective immediately. Turn in your weapon and badge." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in. Brennan's face went pale. "Sir." "This is not a discussion," Hayes said. Brennan slowly unclipped his badge and handed it over. Marcus stood silently. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. Justice didn't need noise. It had witnesses. The crowd didn't cheer. There was no shouting, no clapping, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when people realize they've just watched something important happen. Officer Brennan stood frozen. No badge, no authority left in his hands. Captain Hayes spoke briefly with him in low tones before directing another officer to escort him to the cruiser. Brennan didn't resist. He didn't argue. His shoulders were heavy, his eyes fixed on the ground. Marcus watched, still calm, still steady. Ethan Wallace walked over slowly. "Marcus, I'm sorry this happened." Marcus nodded. "I know." Colonel James Reed placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You handled yourself well." Marcus exhaled. "I just did what I was trained to do." Phones were still recording, but now the tone had changed. People whispered to each other. Some shook their heads. Others looked angry, not at Marcus, but at what they had witnessed. Captain Hayes stepped forward again, addressing the site. "I will be filing a full report," he said. "Body cam footage and witness video will be reviewed immediately." He turned to Marcus. Sir, you're free to go. You never should have been stopped. Marcus nodded. Thank you, Captain. Colonel Reed spoke next, his voice calm but firm. This isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. The words carried. By that evening, the videos were everywhere. Clips showed the gun half-drawn. The commands. The calm man standing still. People didn't need commentary. They could see it. News stations ran the story all night. Social media exploded. Past complaint against Brennan surfaced. Traffic stops. Aggressive questioning. Citizens who said they were treated unfairly but never believed. The department released a statement the next morning. Officer Kyle Brennan was placed under investigation. He was later terminated. Mandatory retraining policies were updated. Marcus returned to the site the next day. Same boots, same vest, same calm. But this time, people looked at him differently. Not with fear, with respect. Justice didn't shout. It stood still, stayed calm, and let the truth speak for itself. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it so others can see what accountability looks like. And comment where you're watching from. Your voice matters.